Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
What's the craziest shit that's happened in your local area?
Perhaps it is not just one thing, but all these things happened over the course of 3 years on my street, where I live, specifically in my neighborhood. I think this place is cursed. Here are just a few examples. Neighbor number 1 suddenly became an alcoholic. His younger sister, age 24, was diagnosed with cancer, and his grandmother fell down the stairs and died. His father turned out to be a priest and was transferred to another parish. Neighbor number 2 was diagnosed with schizophrenia and attacked his own sister with a knife. He was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where he died after that. Neighbor number 3 hanged himself at home. His body was found months later, long after it had begun to decay. Neighbor number 4, his 18-year-old daughter hanged herself. Neighbor number 5, 2 sons fell into drug addiction. They had finished university, perfect chads, an exemplary home, etc. And here's my story. My mother kicked me out of the house, stayed with my brother, and continues to make his life miserable to this day. My father ran away from home with another woman.
My brother tried to sacrifice me to some pagan god when we were younger. He's a schizophrenic and went through a phase where he was reading books on stuff like that all the time. Didn't make the news, but was the talk of the town for a long time.
Did your parents punish him? If the answer is no, then I assume he's younger than you.
He's the older brother. They took him to the doctor to put him on stronger meds, but found out that he was making himself throw up after taking them, so they didn't have to up his prescription. Just keep a closer eye on him after meals. They also burnt all of his supernatural books and threw away his tools, like this one rigged dagger he made to sacrifice me with out of the metal rail to a drawer, and a bunch of beads and tape and leather and shit.
That's terrible, but not gonna lie. Your brother sounds cool. Shame he's hostile to you, but imagine if he was like that cannibal guy in jail in Silence of the Lambs and being interviewed. I bet he'd have lots of cool shit to say. Not that I condone his actions, and I'm glad you're okay.
When he wasn't going off the deep end, he was a pretty chill brother. That's how he got me alone with him after all. He said he just wanted to hike with me, and I was excited that he was sharing what I thought was a new harmless passion with me. In hindsight, I should have realized that since he wasn't really eating recently, that something was about to happen. That was his sign that he was about to go batshit, starving himself for no reason. It all worked out though. Since he has that habit, he is weaker than your average dude, and I was able to overpower him and get away.
There's been a lot of murders where I live starting from about 2010. Before that, I can't recall a single one. There was a span of about 6 months where 3 people were killed by different people, not like a serial killer. It's starting to feel like this place was picked for an experiment, because it seems too bizarre when you consider my area is less than half a square mile. The man who killed his wife because he believed she was possessed and he was a vampire. The kid who was tortured to death over a vague threat he made, I think that's what it was. The kid who killed his mother and her girlfriend because they would laugh at him for not having a girlfriend, then dismembered them and hid them in the shed. The serial Christian who lived 2 streets away from me. The other serial Christian who lived a street away from me in the opposite direction to the other one. The man who had his head blown off with a shotgun that no one was ever charged with because the only witness killed herself before she could give evidence. The student who stabbed his flatmate to death over a nothing argument. The group of kids who did a home invasion and stabbed a father and son. The father died. The guy I once considered a friend who stabbed his girlfriend 27 times when she had only been his girlfriend for 2 days. That lunatic woman who was absolutely going to knife me to death if I hadn't startled her or been a coward. I've done a Greentext on it before. I won't bore anyone with it again. Honestly, the list goes on. It's starting to spook me going out there at night.
When I was 22, I was walking back from work when suddenly a hobo fast walks straight at me, pulls me into a bear hug and said, "You're going to die tonight if you make the wrong move." I was a bit shaken because I thought he was trying to stab me, but kinda forgot about it because I was on the way to a friend's birthday at a local pub. Anyways, 7 hours later I'm completely sloshed along with my friends, and we exit the pub around closing time. We get to the subway and some 15-year-old kid starts getting in my friend's face, obviously trying to start a fight. I have the impulse to just trip him over from behind so we can move on, but get nauseous from the drinks and don't. After a few minutes of this, he gives up and leaves. I go home and try to forget about an unpleasant ending to a fun night out. The Monday following this, I'm having lunch with my boss, and he starts going off on some rant about immigrants ruining the country. I'm half listening until he mentions someone getting stabbed to death near the pub I was at. According to the lorry driver that comes for breakfast at the cafe I worked at, some poor guy was biking home and got spat at by some kid at a stoplight. He got off his bike to see what that was about, and 5 other guys popped out to back the kid up. There was a fight, and he got stabbed a few times in the wrong spot. Died on the pavement like a dog. The driver heard about it because his son is married to the daughter of a local policeman who said some of the guys had been caught on surveillance cams. I have absolute zero proof, but I am convinced that was the same kid since it was the same subway entrance like 100 meters from where it happened, and it was the same night. Weirdest coincidence that ever happened to me.
I attribute this to living in a cracked-out factory town. But there's a road here where you're a lot more likely to hit a person than you are a deer. It's pretty consistent as there are absolutely no lights there. However, a homeless encampment nearby would be impossible. The place is effectively swampland. Every couple of days you'll see someone walking to seemingly nowhere. There's no gas stations, no sidewalks, nothing for about 10 miles. This is part of my route home, so I pretty routinely see the walkers, occasionally with kids by their side at like 2 in the morning. It's not uncommon for random guys to become road splatter because of this, and I always wonder where their final destination is and why they'd brave a swamp at night for it. At night, you can't see anything. Maybe they think they are taking a shortcut. I did that during the day, walking 3 to 4 hours home from work. A friend found out and gave me rides after. But during that walk I went off trail thinking I could cut diagonal and save like 30 minutes. Nope. Wet, muddy grass, straight up mud, cakes to the boots. But yeah, I thought I was taking a shortcut. What I don't understand is the homeless with kids and pets, on the corner with mom, dad, the kids, and dog, begging for money. One of the parents should at least be working. Here they are teaching the kids this is how to make a living. If they are begging for food but have a dog, they aren't hungry enough. Grinds my gears. All said, homeless people are homeless because they don't make good decisions. That might be all it is.
This one isn't particularly spectacular, but it's very, very real. More of a story of tragedy, prejudice, and misfortune. But I like it. Has a grim vibe to it. Alleged witch, was murdered along one of the main roads in our small German town in the late 1600s. In her memory, and to remember the injustice done to them, her family raised a cross in that spot. Ironically, that cross became a pretty important pilgrimage stop during Corpus Christi and eventually was walled in with a small chapel building. Fast forward to the 60s, and the now car-oriented two-way expansion of the main road means tearing down the historic chapel building, including the cross the alleged witch's family had erected in her memory. The town builds a new, smaller chapel, replacing the old crucifix for whatever reason, and placing the old one in a dedicated square outside the chapel. All of a sudden, misfortune happens all around that place. A surprising number of people get hit by cars, or other traffic-related incidents occur, and now the chapel literally had its walkway taken away, so people would stop being hurt or dying around the crucifix. In the 90s, the chapel burns down. Nobody knows why. Now there is a new chapel, slightly off the main road, still causing discomfort in the people who go there, and the walkway outside is back again, and a bunch of folk tales about spooky shit center around it. I grew up there in the early 2000s and have never stepped foot in that chapel. I didn't know about this story, but in all the child-oriented culture programs we had throughout kindergarten and elementary school, nobody had ever even mentioned it. One last funny addendum is that our little town's chronicle explicitly mentions the last name of the alleged witch. When I was a kid, one of my best friends was a red-haired girl with the same last name. It's a small, tight-knit town, always has been, so who knows if it isn't the same family LMO. The stories revolve mostly around teenagers doing dumb shit in or around the chapel and getting pwned. One story our counselors told us at camp is that as teens, they dared each other to sleep on the altar for the entire night, with both of them ending up seeing spooky shit. One of them heard a mob outside and saw a torchlight through the windows. The other perceived two different things. A horseman loudly circling the chapel, which made him shit his pants every time the horseman stopped out of fear. He'd come barging in, and repeatedly seeing a woman in his peripheral vision, which spooked him so bad that he had to GTFO. They also told us the stories their camp counselors had told them when they were kids, which were a lot worse, like kids doing the same ritual, trying to sleep on the altar at night, and straight up vanishing, or coming back, either completely shell-shocked or visibly bruised. Spooky shit. This also reminds me of a similar story we heard at camp about a wandering traveler being murdered in a robbery in the nearby forest, around the remains of the Roman limes wall in the Middle Ages, and coming back as a vengeful spirit who appears as a glowing green dude that allegedly steals kids and teens out of their tents at camp, and, in one retelling of the story, strung up their disemboweled bodies along the ruins of the limes for the other kids to find the next day. These stories literally go back to German youth times, with an incident where one kid had to sleep alone in a two-man tent due to bullying and ended up missing the next day with his tent slashed. I love this extremely local folklore, but it sucks you can't find anything about it online since they're mostly passed on verbally. That being said, I like the vengeful witch a lot more than the green guy. Retelling this story made me miss my friend, and I hope she's doing fine.
I grew up in St. Augustine, Florida. The preserved historical sites there make it a hotbed for ghost activity, and it's frequently cited as the most haunted city in the U.S. Out of all of the historical sites, the lighthouse seems to be the epicenter of it all. Back in the 2000s, ghost hunters flocked to it, and the lighthouse even had a ghost hunting pass you could buy for some exorbitant fee, where you'd rent out the whole lighthouse for the night and get unrestricted access, except for the upper exterior platform, which was padlocked. The ghosts were apparently so active at night that all you had to do was sit quietly at the base, and you could overhear ghosts having conversations with each other on the upper flights. If you tried to talk to them, it wasn't uncommon for them to respond. In 2006, Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters both did episodes at the lighthouse, and you can see just how active the lighthouse was. From what I hear, the Ghost Adventures episode was comparatively tame for what the site had become known for. Regardless, when the episodes aired, it brought in a new wave of ghost tourism to the lighthouse. I was in school at the time, and the lighthouse ghosts were a constant topic of conversation. All of that changed when, over the span of 2007 to 2008, 3 separate tourists leapt from the top of the tower, killing all 3. 2 in broad daylight, the last one in the middle of the night. The story goes that the girl who jumped in the middle of the night was found in the morning, and the padlock was still secured to the top platform door from the inside. It didn't take long for the Lighthouse Committee to realize that the tourists all had one thing in common. They had been ghost hunting on the lighthouse grounds the night before. They promptly removed the overnight grounds rental pass and only recently posted guided overnight investigation passes back on their website.
Not the craziest shit, though. But one time I noticed a spot in my garden that was occasionally wet. Didn't think much about it, though. But every time I saw it, I wondered what it was. I even proceeded to smell it. Seemed to be water. And I wondered how it may have come to this spot. Then, another day, I saw it raining on that very spot, and that spot alone. It was kinda like in that Truman movie, that scene when it rains only on Truman. There was nothing special to see up there in the sky. It was a cloudy day. It started to rain all over the place later that day. I wondered for that one spot where the rain dropped first, and even searched the internet for a phenomenon like this. Most people thought I was lying. Some people showed me videos of something like that happening somewhere else on this planet. But other people said those videos were fake. I saw it was real.
Reminds me of a peculiarity in my yard in 2006. There was, for one summer only, a most intriguing clover patch. It had a lot of 4-leafers, but I felt there was more to it than just that. I think it was the short kind with white chevrons. I took photos of it, but those have been buried by the sands of time. Each time I visited it, it had such an odd vibe. After learning that salvia trippers might live a life as a plant or object, very especially ceiling fans, now I think that there was a salvia tripper remote occupying that clover patch. Somewhere in regular reality, someone was conked out for 5 minutes, but on another level they were experiencing the life of a clover patch for a whole summer. A more recent plant in the yard story. I cleaned up an area to make it nicer, trimmed some trees. There was a heat wave. I had excess water to get rid of. It wasn't good to drink, so I decided to water some trees. I noticed I missed trimming some lower limbs of a willow tree and bent over to pull at them, spilling extra water on the tree. Then I realized the willow, which had mask vibes, was smirking somehow. A lilac tree nearby also has chill old stoner neighbor man vibes. I also noticed that when trees age, in an abstract way, they resemble fireworks fizzling out. Young trees start off with short limbs, big, broad leaves. As they age, their trunks get longer and no new buds appear on the base unless it's cloning. The leaves get farther and farther down the limbs. Imagine a firework in slow-mo. A tree's aging looks like that.
Pulaski County, Missouri. The guy who made the pizzas at the local Casey's got high on meth and tore through the wall of his apartment and shot his 78-year-old neighbor. Also, there's a local boating and fishing spot called Riddle Bridge that I've had some weird experiences at. Me and my friends were driving the back roads, drunk off our ass one night, and right after driving over the bridge, we turned onto the road that runs parallel to the river. There was just a woman laying on the road, completely soaked. We blew past her because we were scared shitless. After we got to the stop sign that was maybe a quarter mile down the road, we decided to turn around just in case she was hurt or something. People have crashed or driven into the river because the road is so close. We came back, and she was gone. The only thing left was a wet spot on the asphalt, but no sign of her, or where she went. Now it's kind of a corny local legend, because the spot became where all the high schoolers go to bang, and now every kid has a story about the drowned lady they saw.
It's not a cult or paranormal, strictly, but there was a gang of kids squatting in a derelict house a few blocks away who went out every night looting, basically. So many people in the neighborhood had stories of their shit being stolen. They even got into my car, the hatch didn't lock, and took my stainless steel water bottles. Left the Bibles in the glove box, though. Anyway, the police eventually evicted them from the squat, and I saw the ordeal. Lines of shit all over the front yard. Power tools, scooters, bags of I don't know what else. Anyway, I went in the squat a few nights later to check it out, and the kids had been having the time of their lives. Drugs galore, scribbling shit all over the walls, and they'd obviously returned after the cops evicted them to say FTP and all that shit. Anyway, there was some real psycho shit in one of the rooms. Guy had been tripping big time on shrooms and obviously met some entities. And there was some evidence the kids were all interested in this sort of shit. In another room, there was an Ouija board painted on a mirror, and a book of UFOs and alien encounters laying on the floor.
When my mom was growing up, she had a friend whose dad was kind of strange. He was reclusive, a little violent. His wife left him one day for another man, and he was left raising the daughter, Mom's friend, alone in the 70s. Fast forward to 2005, the police break down the now old guy's door and take him to trail. Turns out he'd bashed his wife's face in and tied her body to some bricks and chucked her in a local lake. Apparently, the body came to rest on a ledge just short of the deepest part of the lake. Another one, about 25 years ago, the owner of a local Chinese restaurant got murdered with a meat cleaver in broad daylight outside of the restaurant by a disgruntled worker. A lot of people say it happened in front of a bus stop, where a load of pensioners were waiting, and they saw it all.
I've lived all over the place, so I'll just follow the sequence of my habitation. Windsor, Colorado. Though it's much larger now, when I graduated high school, 2010, the town had a population of about 18,000. My graduating class was 122 people. Between my class and the ones directly above and below me, I know of at least 30 people who have died. Some were normal stuff, like overdoses, suicides, and car accidents, but most of them are bizarre. My best friend died after getting food poisoning and vomiting so much that his esophagus ruptured and he bled out before the paramedics arrived. Another good friend had a heart attack at 26, despite being perfectly healthy and fit, not steroids, just really active. Another was a murder-suicide. 2 girls from the class below mine died falling off a waterfall in Oregon. And then a year later, a guy from my class died falling off a different waterfall, also in Oregon. One was a freak boat accident. There are plenty other strange ones, but you get the idea. Oh, and half the town got wiped out by a tornado in 2008. That was wild. It was the last day of school and we weren't allowed to leave until like 7 o'clock. That was some bullshit. Boulder, Colorado. I wasn't there for either, but the JonBenet Ramsey murder is an obvious one. The 2021 King Soopers mass shooting was pretty disquieting to me, because that's where I did my grocery shopping when I lived there. Gunnison, Colorado. Nothing too crazy, but I did see a buddy of mine eat shit on a longboard cruising down 9 Mile Road and bite his tongue clean through. Now he sounds like a spurg. Fort Collins, Colorado. A bizarre number of unsolved murders, considering how genteel the city is. The most famous is probably Peggy Hetrick. Portland, Maine. Other than the city having burned down 3 times in its history, being the birthplace of the Prohibition movement, and currently being home to the International Cryptozoology Museum, worth the $10 if you're ever in the area, it's a lot of fun. I'd say the massive proliferation of junkies has been rather shocking. What was a lovely city a decade ago is now just discarded needles and natty daddy cans littered everywhere. Orono, Maine. When I was living there, a UMaine student ate LSD and jumped off a bridge into the Penobscot River and drowned. They renamed the bridge after him LMAO Hanover, New Hampshire. Dartmouth students off themselves with astounding frequency, presumably because their families place huge pressure on them and they freak out the first time they receive a B on an assignment and Sudoku out of shame. San Juan Island, Washington. Well, there was the Pig War, a military standoff between British and American soldiers over the uncertain boundary between America and Canada, which resulted in no casualties, but did cost the life of a pig. I also met a woman there who stumbled onto my property wearing high-grade night vision goggles and told me she was tracking Sasquatches. Kittery, Maine, brain cancer at extraordinary rates due to the proximity to the shipyard. Portsmouth, New Hampshire. A local kid, fleeing the cops, donned a suit of plate armor. His dad was a medieval enthusiast and Ren Fair organizer, and attempted to walk through the Piscataqua River using some sort of homemade breathing apparatus, and drowned. I also found a live crab about 30 degrees up a tree I was climbing to get a better view of a boat that had struck a bridge. I assume a gull put it there and forgot about it. Cleveland, Ohio. I wasn't there during this time, but the Cuyahoga River used to be so polluted that it would routinely catch fire, which must have been quite a sight. Manhattan, Kansas. Literally nothing of note has ever happened there, which is remarkable in its own right. It is effectively purgatory. Valentine, Nebraska. Some insane Spaniard bought a cattle ranch and started hosting cockfights, which are obviously illegal in this country, but the authorities didn't give a shit. I never went, but from what I surmised, everyone was perfectly aware and just didn't care. To be fair, I didn't either. It was just odd. Cornish, New Hampshire. Salinger lived there for most of his life, and the locals had no idea because he was a recluse. He also maintained a separate house from the rest of his family. His third wife still lives there and lets you camp on the property. It's huge and abuts a pond, if you ask nicely. El Paso, Texas. Not technically here, but directly across the border in Juarez. They're kind of one contiguous conurbation. Hundreds of murders of women, mostly factory workers and prostitutes. Despite what one might think, it doesn't seem to be cartel-related, but rather some well-connected nouveau riche types who are protected by the cops. This phenomenon was the inspiration for Bolano's 2666.
I've never heard of any local stuff, I'm afraid. But my mom is from New England, and there was a grave of an ancestor, great something aunt, I believe, which had the reputation of being from a witch. Supposedly, she was tried and found guilty during colonial times or thereabouts. But they just ostracized her, and she died of old age many years later. She showed me a picture of a kind of ghost over the grave. But that's all I know. One thing more prosaic from my own life is that well outside my hick hometown of Wellston, Oklahoma is a guy's private mansion. He has an armed guard on his payroll for security. A normal local guy. Well, I guess it's not too strange for a rich guy to have a guard, but it's just kind of weird, given the context of the town and country. And I always wondered if something was amiss. Teenagers would drive out there and stop at his gate to see the guard. My sister took me once. I wonder what that guy had on the property that he was so protective of.
Taneytown, Maryland. Guy who lived a block away from the house I grew up in built a bomb. It went off in his house. Police chief was convicted on federal charges of illegally transferring machine guns. Local family with a construction business launders drug money through their company. Guy drove his truck through the front of the town office when they shut off his water. Friends and I explored an abandoned golf course in a neighboring city. Found a murder site in the basement of the clubhouse. Got beamed with weird gray-washing light by a UFO in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Now I live near Ephrata, Pennsylvania. A local was digging up bodies and selling the remains on Facebook.
I am from Ohio. I have plenty of stories. One night, a buck came strolling along in a yard across the street from me. The first thing that grabbed my attention was the size. I had never seen a buck that was this large. What happened next will forever be etched in my memory, and it is a story I can never tell anyone. This giant buck jumped up and grabbed onto a tree. It wrapped all 4 of its legs around the trunk and then started to shimmy upwards. It made so much noise. Sticks were breaking, branches and leaves were falling down. It had to have torn its arms to shreds. My jaw dropped. I may have said holy shit. And then I ran inside to get my phone because I knew nobody would believe me. When I ran back outside, wouldn't you know, it was gone.
Yeah, that does sound like legit demonic possession. I haven't seen many blatant cases of that to my knowledge, but I have seen another category of demonic possession: thralls of vampires. Energy vampires who probably do drink blood and eat babies in private when they go pop off to a fancy mansion to repair the computer network for the millionth time in a row. You'd think the millionaire owner would have developed some security system or not have the exact same identical GD computer problem every single week like clockwork, but that's just the cover they use. The thralls, honest to the whole universe, believe their ugly-ass, non-sentient bio-robot masters are actually the one true God, creator of heaven and earth. If you tell them that gods don't have fupas, diabetes, or repulsive faces and voices, the thralls go berserk like a rabid dog and try to tear your face off with their teeth. If their vampire masters told them to commit heinous crimes in public, you'd bet your ass they'd do it in a heartbeat without any hesitation and no questions. It's scary how they act. Neither party are quite sentient. I've seen it happen to people who should know better, too. The thralls just hand over all of their agency and free will to a non-sentient psychopath blob.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.